What is the best case scenario and the worst case scenario for Nebraska in 2025? Many are discussing, including us next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase.
Welcome in. It is Monday, July 7th. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. We made it through 4th of July weekend, I believe, with all body parts intact. Congratulations. We will review the holiday weekend later in the show, and we've got a countdown, or maybe it's just a list, but something to introduce that is going to get us all the way up to Big Ten Media Days. But first, for the business at hand, something we did not get into in what was a busy few days before the 4th of July last week. On Tuesday, you may have seen that Yahoo Sports and the Sporting News, which have something of a partnership in the media world, published an article written by Tom Gorski. The headline on Yahoo's site says, comically, though not intending to be comedy, CBS Sports sounds alarm for Nebraska football as nightmare scenario puts Matt Rhule, Dylan Raiola in the spotlight. What do you think, Connor, just from hearing that alarm?
It's a very, it's a very alarming headline. It makes, I guess the point of clickbait is they want you to click, and that would make me, like, as a Nebraska fan, as a person who, consumes Nebraska-related media, stuff like that.
Very concerned.
I click on that every single time, 100 times out of 100 times. I'm like, whoa, what's going on over here? Well, it turns out it was just an aggregation of a CBS story that Tom Fornelli does every year, where he lays out the best case and worst case scenario for every Big Ten team. He did that for Nebraska. Mitch, I'm going to tee this up for you. Let's talk about how we got to the Yahoo part of the story first, before we actually discuss best case and worst case scenario for Nebraska.
All right, we can do that. So this is not normal. I mean, there are probably some sites out there, maybe some like Facebook accounts out there where it's normal to just aggregate stuff that is not breaking news or a viral episode. Aggregating, of course, is just like taking someone else's article and writing an article about that. And Yahoo is seemingly a reputable news source. So if you see something like this from Yahoo, you're thinking, oh, well, this must be important. And then you click on it, and it's not important at all, because all they're doing is rewriting a story from CBS that's just a standard CBS summer piece of best case and worst case scenarios that's laced with humor. We'll get into what the CBS article said that was published back on June 24th. That was when Fornelli's article came out. And no shade to Tom Fornelli. Like, he's just doing his job. Yeah. He's doing something that I might do, that some of my colleagues might do at The Athletic. It's Yahoo and the Sporting News who have a partnership that are in the crosshairs here for their embarrassing display of journalism. You need to be discerning these days with what you read.
Yes.
And here's an example. I look at the date that this article came out, and I get a bit of a tinfoil hat on, and I notice that it came out on July 1st, which was one day after Matt Rhule tweeted, remember this, quote, "Too many people have profited financially off negativity and despair. Their time is over." So Yahoo and the Sporting News said, nah, it's still our time. Check this out. The Yahoo article, I will go to this, that we're talking about after the headline, says After finally breaking through with the winning season, Nebraska football has fresh hope with Matt Rhule and 5-star QB Dylan Raiola. But CBS Sports warns the program could be in for a harsh reality check. CBS is not holding back this year when it comes to its outlook for Nebraska's upcoming season, especially when looking at the potential worst-case scenario. The prediction, a disappointing 5-7 season that throws the program into turmoil. That's a joke. What a joke. So they did worst case and best case for 18 Big Ten programs. And Nebraska's worst case is 5-7, which we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But there are only 4 teams in the league for which CBS predicted a higher win total.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. Everybody else was 5 wins or far below that. I don't know.
Is it possible, Mitch, that they did 36 articles and one was good and one was bad for every team aggregated from the CBS Sports stories? That's 36 stories off of one story. That's incredible.
It would be incredible, and it would be also inaccurate because they did not do that. They did not write a story about. They did not aggregate Fornelli's outlook for Nebraska's best case scenario, which put Nebraska at 11-1 in the Big Ten championship. Of course not, because
that's dumb.
We're not going to do a podcast about that. We're not going to do a podcast. Nobody's going to do a podcast about Northwestern's worst case scenario or Purdue's worst case scenario, but Nebraska,
right?
It's just a special place.
To your point, be very, very careful about just what the sources of what you read are these days. There's a lot of things that are designed to make you say, "Whoa, is this true?" And then you read the story and you read whatever it is, and you'll say, "Oh my goodness, wow, this is in print. It must be true." That is not the case. It has never actually been less the case than it is right now. So trust the people who have been around doing it for a long time. Hopefully Mitch is one of those people because he's writing great stuff all the time for The Athletic. He certainly is a reputable source. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's just no good though.
It's hard when that crap comes from Yahoo, which is a place where you've traditionally gone to find good material. When you actually get into the CBS story, and we'll spend a few minutes on this too. The story came out way back on June 24th, as I said, and we're at July 7th, so it's been 2 weeks. Fornelli's getting a lot of run out of his piece. So as much as they misrepresented what he had to say with the aggregation, at least people are talking about it, which is kind of half the battle or 3/4 of the battle. If you scroll to the part about Nebraska finishing with its best case scenario, as I said, 11-1, and it says Nebraska will play for the Big Ten championship and then lose Dana Holgorsen to Oklahoma State as head coach at the end of the season. So
pretty funny.
I don't know if that's best case scenario.
Yeah, even in their best case scenario, they lose Dana Holgorsen. That's kind of crazy, but okay.
The worst case, Dylan Raiola struggles. The defense can't get things done. Nebraska loses to Iowa. Raiola transfers after the season, and Rhule enters 2026 on the hot seat.
Oh, and Dylan Raiola watches too many TikToks. That was also in the or something like that.
There was a Mahomes angle in both the best case and the worst case. I checked out Iowa's worst case scenario. They could have done an aggregation on this and said, CBS predicts that Kirk Ferentz will sign a 10-year contract extension without Iowa fans knowing.
Yeah.
Would that have gotten some clicks in Des Moines and Iowa City? I don't know, but his worst case for Iowa is 4-8. And after the season ends, fans learn that Kirk Ferentz signed a 10-year extension. Wisconsin's worst case scenario is 3-9. I don't know if that's actually the worst case scenario. I think the floor is possibly lower than that for Wisconsin this year.
I think there's a couple of these, Mitch. I would say actually, including Nebraska's, that I think Nebraska's worst case is worse than 5-7.
Yeah, they're being kind.
And I think Nebraska's best case is probably not quite as good as 11-1. But I don't know. Like there's a world where this goes down in a fireball. I mean, there's a world where that happens. I don't know if it's likely. I mean, obviously the likelihood is that Nebraska's record ends up somewhere right in the middle of that best case and worst case scenario, and it skews pretty high. It skews Nebraska. It skews up to 7 and 8 and 9 wins for Nebraska this year, which is kind of what you want to see. But yeah, there's a world where it never gets off the ground and crashes before you really get going. That exists.
You have to kind of meter yourself. You have to kind of like limit yourself if you're going to do a best case and worst case scenario, because a worst case scenario like is always quite a bit darker than like what these articles actually predict. I mean, Nebraska's entire offense.
It's always more than the record that makes it really dark.
Yeah, Nebraska's worst case scenario, like I mean, let's just keep this on the football field, but like their entire offensive line could get injured, in preseason camp, and like that's worse than anything that he predicts here. So anyway, just something to blow off steam about here at the start of this week in July. Should we, when we come back, give our own actual best case and worst case scenarios for Nebraska? Like just jump into this world and explore what we think best case and worst case could look like?
I'd love to, because I think it hinges on a couple things, and we'll talk about the likelihood that Nebraska can potentially get to that best case scenario, and we'll do that when we return.
But a moment right here to tell you about Gametime. There's this urge that we have in these summer months, or maybe it comes to you in the fall or the winter, just to get to a game. Have you ever decided at the last minute you just want to go to a game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day, and suddenly you realize you want to be in the stands. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. The money you save on tickets, if you use Gametime, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes all of that possible. It makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app drop the closer you get to first pitch, if it's a baseball game or the tip of a basketball game. They've got incredible last-minute deals. You can see clear seat views. There's a low price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets today with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code Locked On College for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, welcome back. Hope everybody had a good holiday weekend and stayed cool as much as they possibly could. Mitch coached his last baseball game potentially ever over the weekend. Congratulations on a great run, Mitch.
It was a good run. I don't know what the future is going to hold for me in coaching. It certainly is not going to be like it has been for the last 7, 8, 9 years, if you want to go all the way back to T-ball. We really just kind of count the last 7 because it's been this one group and this one organization. So yeah, emotional day on Sunday for me, for sure, on the diamond in Lincoln. We finally got to play on the fields, or our team played on them while I was cruising in the Caribbean a few weeks ago. But I finally got to be out there. My son Zach finally got to be out there on the beautiful turf fields at the Sandhill Globals complex in Lincoln. As you come in and you go toward Memorial Stadium and Haymarket Park, PBA, you see those fields on your right, on the west side of 180, and they're everything that they appear to be. Nebraska Wesleyan's home field is there. There were games on that. We didn't get on that field, but we did play on what is Nebraska baseball's big practice field. So kind of a little replica, a bit smaller, but a little 385 to center, a little replica of Haymarket Park. So that was a lot of fun. And super emotional to come for that all to come to an end. I know a lot of people go through that here in July. Yep. So I added my experience to what others have seen. If our team would have won and made it to the round of 8 in the gold bracket, we were in the gold bracket. If we'd have won and made it to the round of 8 in the gold bracket yesterday, I would have coached against ex-Nebraska infielder Brant Vlieger, who is out there with his son. I noticed that on the statistics in the Game Changer app.
Nice. What a matchup it would have been. That would have been a good
For
story
sure.
to tell as well. Yeah. So it sounds like it was a good weekend for everybody. Aside from the emotions of it all, I think ultimately it's good though.
Yeah. How was your weekend? Did you have any fireworks? Any literal or figurative fireworks? First 4th of July as a parent, did that cause any extra stress? How did everything go?
We were a little worried, but my daughter peacefully slept through the fireworks.
Good.
I mean, hell, they've been going off for like 3 weeks. So, and they're not stopping just because the 4th of July happened, by the way. This is just like apparently a continuing thing throughout the, middle of June to the middle of July. But no, everything went well. I spent Friday night out at Warner Park and helped shoot off the fireworks there. Great show as it always is, and a really good crowd. So, yeah, it was a good weekend.
Did you picture little Sophie next year, like holding a sparkler and standing in your driveway, ready to go, dressed in her red, white, and blue outfit?
It's hard to tell, like, what if she's kind of like skittish about some stuff, like, she doesn't like to, it takes her a little while to warm up. So I wonder how she'll deal with fire. I'm not sure yet.
If she's like most kids, I'm sure she'll love it. Maybe not next year, but definitely when she's almost 3. This was the first year that I can remember, maybe going back to like my teenage years, that I spent $0 on fireworks.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to not have to go into the fireworks stand. And there have been some years where I've tried to avoid it, and then on the 4th of July, my kids are like, let's go do this. And my wife says, you need to go take them and get a few things. And I just end up spending, $50 or $100, whatever, on some fireworks. So you basically light your money on fire. You do that right there at the fireworks stand. This year, no, we spent some time at a lake. We watched fireworks in the evening. My daughter was doing something with friends. We had baseball early in the morning on the 5th, so there was good reason to not stay out really late, and it all turned out pretty well.
Excellent. All right, and you got a couple extra bones in the back pocket. Don't worry, people will still be blowing off fireworks for the next several weeks, and then like they'll do it again on Thanksgiving for some reason and New Year's for some reason as well. All right, best case and worst case scenario. Let's spend a couple minutes on this best case here. So Tom Fernellis of CBS Sports, like you said, getting a lot of run on this. He said 11-1 a couple of weeks ago. He said Nebraska is finally back and Dylan Raiola takes a huge step forward, and people are wondering if Patrick Mahomes should start to mimic Dylan Raiola instead, and that their only regular season loss is the game on the road against Penn State in November, the second to last week of the season. I mean, hell, if Nebraska's 10-0 going into the Penn State game, they're almost certainly a top 5 team in the country going into that. We're talking about like a game of the century kind of game. Like if going into the Penn State game, if both teams are, if Nebraska's what they're predicted to be in this case, and Penn State is what everyone thinks they're going to be this year. And it also makes that Iowa game huge. I don't know if I see that good for Nebraska, but not that far off. I mean, you could really make a case to me that Nebraska starts off their season. I mean, hell, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-0-ish before you go into November. I don't think that's likely. There's a couple more tricky games in there that there were last year, and obviously that big home date with Michigan. But you could convince me reasonably that Nebraska ends up 9-3. Like that feels
that's your best case.
Like it could happen.
Connor's best case 9-3.
I think so. I was gonna say 10-2, but 9-3 seems like a really good deal.
Could you imagine on the week leading up to the Penn State game, week 12 of the season, be Nebraska's 10th game, November 22nd, if the Huskers we're 10-0 in Fornelli's best case situation. Like there's a bye week between so you go to the Rose Bowl and win on November 8th to move to 10-0.
Yeah, they'd basically already be in the playoff at that point.
People are gonna aggregate us and make fun of us for talking about this. Like, look what these two tools are talking about. Nebraska winning in the Rose Bowl to go to 10-0. Now, we're not really saying that. We don't expect that. But if that were to happen and then Nebraska's off the following week, what would Nebraska fans do that weekend while they were off? Would they spend the weekend like preparing Memorial Stadium for a CFP home game? Would they be scouting other sites, like booking hotels in places like Austin, Texas, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama?
The tension would be palpable throughout that week.
To be marking off space to build a statue of Dylan Raiola while the season is still going on. Now, it would be just because it's been so long. I do not foresee that. And the crazy part is Nebraska's not going to be an underdog by more than 6 or 7 points in any singular game leading up to November 22nd.
Yeah.
Michigan could be favored by 4 or 5 coming into Lincoln. It's going to depend, of course.
Going on the road first time,
it's going to depend, of course, how the first 3 games go for both teams. But if you have a somewhere between like a 40 and a 70% or 80% in some cases chance to win a whole bunch of games, like the percentage that you win them all diminishes quite a bit to the point where you get down to like less than 10%. So the best case scenario is that Nebraska goes 12-0, wins the Big Ten championship, and then cruises through to the CFP title. Like that's the best case scenario. Why wouldn't, for every team out there? But you have to have a dose of realism with it. I'd say 10-2. Like I think 10-2 is about as good as I can see this team, knowing the personnel finishing in 2025.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear people say that all the time. The best case scenario is 12-0, and the most important game is the first. In this case, I mean, there's like you said, Mitch. There's just so many like in between 40 to 60% games for me that it's just really hard to predict Nebraska to win them all, especially given their track record. I mean, their track record over the last however many years actually says that they'll lose more of them than they'll win. So there's that piece of it too. I think it's okay for people to be in prove-it mode a little bit. With that being said, I do think there's some really good stuff on the table for Nebraska this season. It could really pop. I just don't know if that's the most likely thing to happen.
6 to 7 of the first 9, and definitely the last 2, are all going to be projected to be somewhat competitive.
Yep.
So you're talking about 10 out of 12 or 9 out of 12 that are going to be projected to be competitive. And I'm including Penn State in there, which might be projected as a lopsided win for Penn State. We'll see, depending on how the 2 teams are doing. So a worst case scenario for Nebraska, I would agree with you from what you said in the previous segment, is lower than 5 wins, as depressing as that is for Nebraska football. Like you can go off the rails. We've seen it. We saw it in 2007. We saw it in 2017. It can happen. I don't look for that to happen this year, but injuries play a role in that. This is the first year with this new dynamic of pay for play and revenue sharing, and all of that can contribute to, an ugly situation. So worst case scenario is probably like 3 wins for Nebraska, but that's about as unlikely as 11 or 12.
All right. When we come back, we will finish out the show with, let's call this like we'll pick a player out of a hat. We have 25 players ish in a hat, and we're going to pick out 10 of them over the next 10 days before Big Ten Media Days. This is our version of a camp countdown or a media days countdown, I suppose. And it begins next.
Okay, time for a countdown. Big Ten Media Days starts 2 weeks from tomorrow, Tuesday. Nebraska's up on the first day in Las Vegas at Big Ten Media Days, July 22nd. Did you know that Big 12 Media Days is underway tomorrow, July 8th? It's July 8th and 9th, Tuesday and Wednesday.
Wow.
In Frisco, Texas.
And then the SEC, I think, is usually next week or at the end of this week.
It's next week.
Yeah, it's very early. So here we go. Big Ten's always one of the last to go.
They do it late. To go back to Tom Fornelli, it all comes back to Tom Fornelli in this episode. In his projection, his best case situation for Nebraska to lose Dana Holgorsen as coach to Oklahoma State after this season, that would really get in the way of Dana's summer plans if he had to go to Frisco, Texas for Big 12 Media Days in the first week of July. He would prefer, and he has a wedding next, not his, but his son's wedding next year around this time on the beach in Cabo. So he can't coach Oklahoma State.
Yeah. By the way, I don't get the sense that he's like super duper itching to get back to be a head coach. I think he wants to check out this lifestyle for a little while, be the offensive coordinator, be in charge of that, and also have a little bit of relaxation and free time in the off season.
I'm also not going to be naive enough to say that if Mike Gundy were to take a hike after this season, and if Nebraska's offense were humming and the Cowboys came calling, that Dana would not be intrigued. You can't just say, hey, he made a bunch of money from Houston and he's happy people get to this place in their careers because they are ambitious and goal-oriented and very driven. It would be attractive for him, no doubt. But maybe he'll choose to be an OC for the rest of his time as a coach. All right. Let's get into this stuff. We're going to do 10 players in 10 days. We might double up on the Thursdays of the next 2 weeks because we have to devote entire shows. We want to devote entire shows on Friday to your questions in the mailbag. Thank you, by the way, for the great response to the mailbag in the summer here when things get a little bit quiet. Man, last week we could barely even fit in the questions that we received, and we had some that I had to roll over to this week. So keep those things coming. LockedOnNEB@gmail.com is how you can get a hold of us, or you can respond on Twitter or in the YouTube comments, but we probably won't see those. So come to us on Twitter or email. 10 intriguing players for Nebraska football as the Huskers head toward preseason camp at the end of this month. We're going to do them not necessarily in order, not necessarily with any criteria other than that they are just intriguing to us. It could be about their talent.
I love this.
It could be about the situation at the position they play. It could be about Nebraska's scheme in depth or what's going on with the coaching at that spot. Just they're intriguing to us.
What do we call this? We have to come up with a name for this. Like the intriguing, like I'm imagining once again, just a giant bowl of football players, and we just pluck one out every day. Like the intriguing bowl seems too on the nose, but like something like that.
Yeah, we did this last year, I believe, and we had a stupid long name for the.
Oh yeah, that's right.
For the it was like I don't know. Maybe we can go back and look at it.
Several words. It was like 6 to 7 words. So yeah, we'll come up with something a little bit more snazzy this year. Just give us a couple days. Maybe by the end of it, we'll have a name for it.
We'll also take your suggestions on names for what we should call our countdown of intriguing players before Nebraska begins the 2025 preseason camp, which is before the 2025 football season. There's one right there. Something like that. Put those in the YouTube comments of this show. We will look. All right. Player number 1 or number 10. The first one that we're doing today here on this Monday, 2 weeks before Big Ten Media Days is, would you like to unveil the player?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit. Let's search around in the bucket here. Here we go. Look what I found. It's Riley Van Poppel. Let's talk about Riley Van Poppel for a couple minutes.
Yeah, he's intriguing to me because of the position that he plays and the lack of experience and experienced depth that Nebraska has there on the defensive line. He's intriguing because he redshirted last year, which is a rarity in college football for a player to redshirt in his second season on campus after having a productive first season. But Nebraska had experience and talent ahead of him. And Riley Van Poppel is looking to be something like the next Ty Robinson, someone who can come into his own late in his career and be an example of how, if you stick to it in college football and you stay persistent and you believe in the system and you do what you're supposed to do on and off the field, you will end up in a good spot in the NFL. And that's exactly where Ty Robinson finds himself right now with the Philadelphia Eagles. I could envision something similar, a similar path for Riley Van Poppel over the next few seasons.
Yeah, I guess I have a question for you. How do you view, because in my mind, there's a lot of people around him or who are going to play around Riley Van Poppel on the defensive line who have like higher ceilings, right? You talk about Winery, Keona Davis, even some guys that came in a couple years ago as well at the same time as Riley Van Poppel, you might look at and say, yeah, I just have higher hopes for that. But Van Poppel found a way to get himself on the field early, was deemed valuable enough to where Nebraska, redshirted him last year to retain a year of eligibility while they had players who felt like, could take that heavy snap count. So like it is, I don't want to talk about Van Poppel like he doesn't have a high ceiling. He does, but I think the expectation is that he is a really consistent defender for Nebraska. You know what I mean? Like, what lens do we view him through?
I think part of the reason that some people may look at him like that is because he played a position as a true freshman that's very difficult for a true freshman to play. He was a highly rated recruit. I mean, not a 5-star like Winery, but a highly rated recruit out of Texas, East Texas, in a place where they play a competitive level, extremely competitive level of high school football. He's got the professional sports genes in him. He's got the size, and he's added the weight in his 2 years at Nebraska to, I think, be someone who has just about as high of a ceiling as anybody on the defensive line. Now, you look at Davis and Winery and the position that they play as primary pass rushers and their athleticism
more flashy,
kind of being off the charts.
Yeah.
And do they stand out as like maybe more like a first round potential if they reach their peak? Yeah. Do you think about Van Poppel like that? Probably not. But could he be an all Big Ten guy? Yeah. And I think he's going to surprise some people with the way that he looks early in the season, because we didn't see him a lot last year. And we remember him as a freshman where he was kind of punching above his weight. Like the big play against Illinois on the goal line stand on 4th down, where he got in there and threw his body in front of the running back and had like almost a season changing kind of defensive stand for Nebraska. That's the image of Riley Van Poppel that people have. And if you were to see him right now, if you look at him on day one of camp, it's not the same guy. Like he's different. He's much bigger. He's been one of the major benefactors of Nebraska's nutrition, first nutrition, and then second their strength program. So I'm intrigued by him because I think he's going to surprise people maybe as soon as week one out there at Arrowhead Stadium and be a player who is a leader alongside Elijah Judy in serving as Nebraska's key to be able to stop the run, which is so important, not just for this defense, but for the season, for the whole team.
I always thought Ty Robinson was really interesting because he always struck me as the kind of guy where you could ask him. I mean, this is what gets him into the NFL, after all the production at Nebraska, because, the word on him was, well, he could do whatever you ask him to. He could reshape his body however you want him to. And he can, kind of fit here and rush the passer a little bit and put his head down and be a good run stopper as well. Like that versatility was really important. So I'll be fascinated to see which lane Riley Van Poppel ends up in. Is he going to be the versatile kind of Swiss Army knife that Ty Robinson was, or Is he more, heavy run stopper type of guy? It'll be fascinating. But you're right, Mitch. In a lot of ways, that play that he made against Illinois, that goal line stand 2 years ago now, and in 2023, that is just that's shaped what everyone think. I mean, when I think about Riley Van Poppel, I think about that. When I think about that season, hell, I think about that play. So that's kind of shaped a lot of the narrative on him, and people should be excited about a couple of the guys that you're going to see a little bit more of this year on the defensive line, I think.
If he can come into the season at 295, then Nebraska's got the kind of defensive lineman that I think Matt Rhule and the defensive staff are hoping and expecting that they have with Riley Van Poppel. For him, it's a matter of building up that size. And he's listed at 290 on the roster right now. So very much in the mold of a Ty Robinson kind of player. So, okay. As we go through the rest of this week and next week, we'll do more. We'll find more intriguing players. We'll pick them out of the hat, and we will discuss their potential and their intrigue ahead of this 2025 football season. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us and making Locked On Nebraska your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith is there with the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.